A lone astronaut wanders the empty halls of a moon base in search of the colonists he hasn't heard anything from in 5 years. What happened here? Where did they all go? And is he really as alone as he thinks he is? My name is Lile. Welcome to Lile's Indie Corner. Let's talk about Deliver Us the Moon. Deliver Us the Moon, which was developed by KeokeN Interactive, was first released for PC in October 2019 and later got a wider release with the help of publisher Wired Productions in April 2020. The game is set in the not-so-distant future, where the Earth's energy crisis has hit the planet hard. The solution is found on the moon in the form of helium-3. A colony is established and for decades all seems well. But suddenly the colony goes dark, there is no more energy being delivered and no one knows what has happened. 5 years after the blackout, you are sent to the moon in the last rocket ship ever made. The game sports a modern 3D graphics style that works well with the sci-fi setting. The environments look shiny and new, fitting for a genre game such as this. Although I personally missed a few blotches and signs of use, since the space station and the colony was supposed to be lived in for a couple of decades at this point. While we definitely get some fun destruction and explosions, the parts still look like everything was built yesterday. I guess these Roombas did their job very, very well. But overall, it just looks gorgeous, and for a small team and a limited budget, I think it's amazing what they were able to give us. Deliver Us the Moon also runs pretty smoothly. On the highest graphic settings, I had only a few frame rate drops and otherwise just a really good time. The only thing that could rain on my parade occasionally was the camera. The game switches between first-person sections and third-person sections. Something that confused me at first, but was easy to get into as the game progressed. The first-person parts were mostly in tight, confined spaces, where you needed to take a closer look at things and they worked well. For the exploration, you were mostly in third person, which made it easier to traverse the different environments. These sections are also much longer. And as I said, the camera didn't always agree to certain angles. Especially if you were exploring a more narrow space, it tended to get stuck in a wall or a corner. It wasn't super distracting and it was also easy to leave these spaces, but it still took me out of the moment at times. But all in all, they captured the sci-fi feeling very well. There are some really impressive set pieces that look insanely awesome, and the colony specifically was so much fun to explore. The attention to detail is really great, and you do get a sense of people having lived there, from small notes to posters and the occasional graffiti. They also did a pretty good job of making it look like people left in a hurry, which plays into the story of the game. You know by now how much I love sci-fi, and if I could play games that look like this till the end of my life, I would die very happy. The animation of the main character is rather simple and can look awkward at times, but it serves its purpose quite well. For an indie title, I will not harp on this too much. Does it look like an actual human? No, but it's close enough. I think more attention was paid to the ASE, the little flying ball that accompanies you throughout the game. Funnily enough, this little expressionless drone carries most of the emotional story beats, so it got a little more love. You can also find audio-visual logs in Deliver Us the Moon. Those are also kept very simple. You just see these human-like shapes and hear the voices playing over static images. There are no facial animations whatsoever, and I think that was clever on the part of the devs. KeokeN knew their limits, and I can appreciate that. So, while there are some minor issues, overall I love the look of the game. Sci-fi just needs to sci-fi! We all know, if you make something space-related, you have to get the sound right. So much of the tension and the atmosphere comes from the sound design in these environments. And I'm very happy to report that Deliver Us the Moon is outstanding in that regard. The soft metal clanking of your astronaut boots on the floor, the little beeps of your flying drone friend, and the occasional zapping of some cut wires are all great. But the real awesome stuff happens once there is no atmosphere. and you're in cold, dark space. Because as we've learned, there is no sound in space. I think the movie Gravity was the first that I watched that really utilized this to its full potential. And Deliver Us the Moon learned a lot from it. Whenever there is a transition from inside the space station to actual space, the sound cuts out and you're suddenly left with only your breath and the bumps of your helmet. I had goosebumps every time this happened and was captivated by it. So well done! Again, they really captured the sci-fi feel of the setting, and I could not be happier. Also, they made sure to include some sounds while on the surface of the moon, while having none in space. My heart is full, you guys. Whenever a team really commits to their product, it makes me incredibly happy. And these guys wanted to make sure to do the best with what they had. When it comes to the music, it stays in its lane. Very atmospheric sci-fi landscape that swells at exactly the right times. It seems to take inspiration from Hans Zimmer's Interstellar soundtrack, if my ears don't deceive me. There is some synth organ in there for sure. There isn't anything hugely surprising here. It's music that you would expect in a science fiction video game. That is not a bad thing, it fits like a glove, but it's also not very memorable. There are some melancholic undertones which convey this feeling of loneliness that is ever present in this completely empty colony. In tandem, music and sound design give you exactly the kind of immersion you would want it to. Your main goal in Deliver Us the Moon is to find out what happened to the moon colony and to try and restore the energy flow back to Earth. To that end, you explore, and that consists mostly of walking. But this game is definitely more than a walking simulator. While you do run around a lot, there are lots of notes to read to try and figure out where everyone has gone off to. There are puzzles to solve, and there are even some action sequences in which you need to navigate space and try to catch bottles of oxygen to stay alive. The devs put a lot of thought into how to make this experience interesting for the players, and they came up with some fun solutions. I think the only part that I didn't enjoy was when you had to stealth around some hostile drones. There is no stealth system in the game, so this part felt very unnecessary. It wasn't like one hit could down you anyway, so in the end I just ran around them and took the zapping they gave me. But everything else was great! The puzzles were not difficult. I can't imagine the average gamer having much of a problem with those. It was usually more of a case of carefully exploring the environment and finding everything you needed to progress to the next area. But at least to me it still felt super satisfying and gave me the feeling of big brain! The action sequences were exciting and never overstayed their welcome. There also weren't that many, so they always felt fresh when they occurred. And the couple of QTEs in there took me by surprise every time, so I had to replay these sequences. But the checkpoints are very forgiving, so that wasn't a chore either. The most fun part was definitely exploring the space station and piecing together what had occurred. It's a well played out mystery that has some satisfying answers, but also some loose threads that leave space for future games in this series. And yes, there is a sequel that I will also play and review. I didn't mind having some questions left unanswered. I even think it made sense to not know certain things. Your log keeps track of your current task and all the notes you have discovered and gives minor clues to what is still missing. I like that a lot, but people who might not enjoy hand-holding may be put off by this. But for all intents and purposes, I had a blast for the 5 hours it took me to get through the game. Everything was well paced and the mechanics didn't get stale too quickly. If you are into exploration and some fun, short-lived action, I can wholeheartedly recommend this game. We start as an unnamed mute astronaut with a task to go to the moon to figure out why the colony has gone dark and why Earth is no longer receiving any energy. We get a bleak glimpse into Earth's future. There are no natural resources left, and what was once described as the blue marble is now a desolate, lifeless shell of grey and brown. One might even think that this Earth is no longer worth saving. But as the protagonist, we listen to the voices speaking to us over our earpiece and launch a rocket into space. With us in it, of course. It is our duty to make things right, and we will do so no matter the cost. We soon learn that hope is the only thing that will keep us going. Because the docking station is completely empty. There is no communication at all, and the feeling of complete isolation sets in. This feeling is persistent throughout the entire game, and I absolutely loved it. Even though the halls you walk through can be quite vast and were clearly built with many people traversing them in mind, the loneliness is what makes for such a great atmosphere, and that is important to keep up. Through the audio-visual logs, there's always a hope of maybe finding someone left alive, and that drives you forward. There's always this little chance that you maybe can solve this mystery and save Earth while doing so. But there's also plenty to despair over. Once you get a hint of what has really happened, you truly feel alone. You get angry and contemplative, because there is a lot to consider. Deliver Us the Moon does ask some very intriguing questions, but it paints a rather black and white picture in most cases, which I thought was a bit of a missed opportunity. The bad guys are very clearly bad guys. I'm sure if we did get to see a face, it would have had a spectacular mustache. So it's mostly up to you to ponder these moral quandaries if you so choose. Or you can just let the narrative take you and follow it along. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not every game needs a grand narrative that explores the nature of humankind. But I guess I expected a tiny bit more from a game that starts with such a dystopian picture of the future. There's also one thing that puzzles me a bit. This is a light spoiler, a twist that comes around the midpoint of the game. So if you want to go into this one completely fresh, go to this timestamp. So, all who wanted to have left? Good. At a point in the game, we find out that the protagonist has been in the colony before, and that we have heard him in certain recordings. He was forced to abandon his partner on the moon and got evacuated back to Earth. What I find so weird is, after that point he still doesn't talk. He stays mute throughout the rest of the game, even though we know who he is and we know his voice. I found that to be a bit of an odd choice, but to each their own. Aside from that, the mystery is very intriguing, fun to explore, and I had such a good time with the game. I'm really excited to see what the sequel can bring to the table and what truths might be revealed. I know the devs said that they are connected but playable completely independently from each other. Still, I can't wait to get back into space! Overall, Deliver Us the Moon is exactly the kind of game a sci-fi loving girl like me lives for. It's got great music, amazing sound design, fun exploration, and a mystery that is worth exploring. With a 5 to 6 hour playing time, it's also right in that sweet spot for me. As I get older, I really enjoy these shorter narrative-focused experiences more and more. I am so excited for Deliver Us Mars. And that's it for me today. Thank you so much to the Potato Witch for helping me edit this script. If you're also into old school JRPGs, you should really go check out their video on Jade Cocoon. Will you be picking this up for your own space exploration? Are there other story-driven space games you want me to talk about? Let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and let's be weird together.